We live in an era where the intangible weighs more than the tangible, where something as minimal as a like on a screen can trigger joy, anxiety, or even pain. On the surface, it shouldn't hold so much power. It's just a click, a tap on glass. And yet, we interpret it as if it were a deeply human act. Approval, validation, even affection. This is where the clash between the virtual and the real emerges. In a face-to-face conversation, recognition comes through a gaze, a smile, a silence that lingers with presence. In the digital world, all of this is reduced to an icon. And although that icon has no voice, no warmth, no clear intention, we load it with meaning. That is the mistake and, at the same time, the paradox. We seek in the virtual what only the human can truly provide. Carl Jung argued that human beings live surrounded by symbols that act as bridges between the conscious mind and the unconscious. The like is one of these modern symbols. It means nothing in itself, but we project onto it a disproportionate emotional weight. For some, it becomes a sign of approval. For others, the relief of not being forgotten. The problem arises when that projection replaces the actual experience of connection. This clash carries invisible consequences, because while we think we are interacting, what is really happening is an impoverishment of experience. The click replaces human contact, and in that replacement, nuance, complexity, and depth are lost. The human soul does not thrive on numbers or notifications. It thrives on presence, on gazes, on words shared in a real space. That is why, when a like doesn't arrive, it hurts more than it should, because it isn't the icon we're missing, but the confirmation that we exist for someone else. And when we reduce our worth to that tiny digital spark, we confuse reality with illusion. This is the true clash, believing the screen can replace the heart, when in truth, it only reflects it in its most distorted form. One of the most seductive aspects of the digital world is the speed at which validation arrives. A message sent, a post uploaded, and almost instantly, the notifications appear. Hearts, thumbs, numbers ticking upward. For a moment, it feels like nourishment for the soul. A quick infusion of recognition, a reminder that we are seen. But Jung would warn us here. Whatever offers satisfaction too quickly often carries a shadow, an unseen cost. The like functions as a microdose of approval. Our brain interprets it as social acceptance, triggering the same circuits that once protected us in tribes and families. To be acknowledged meant survival. To be ignored meant exclusion. Yet, in the digital age, this ancient survival mechanism has been hijacked. What once required genuine bonds and time-tested trust can now be simulated with a single tap. And herein lies the illusion. Validation received in this way does not anchor us in real connection. It leaves us floating, untethered, dependent on the next digital spark. Like sugar, it satisfies in the moment but leaves us hungrier afterward. It is nourishment without substance, attention without intimacy. This illusion becomes dangerous because it redefines the terms of worth. Instead of asking, who truly understands me? Who listens when I speak? Who sees me when I am vulnerable? We unconsciously reduce our questions to, how many? How fast? How visible am I in the feed of others? The quality of connection dissolves into the quantity of reactions. Jung taught that the human psyche yearns for wholeness, for integration of the deeper self. But the cycle of instant validation pulls us away from this integration. It fragments us. We begin to live for the mirror rather than the face, for the reaction rather than the reality. And so, the illusion grows. We believe we are valued when the truth is we are only momentarily noticed. We think we are loved, when in reality, we are only briefly acknowledged. The like does not hold us, does not stay with us in our solitude, does not comfort us when the night grows heavy. It flickers and vanishes, leaving behind the echo of emptiness. Carl Jung believed that human beings do not live only in the external world of objects and actions, but also in an inner universe shaped by symbols. Symbols, for Jung, are more than mere signs. They are carriers of psychic energy, gateways to the unconscious. And in today's world, one of the most powerful yet underestimated symbols is the like. Its surface, it is nothing more than a small digital icon, a heart, a thumbs up, a number. But in the psyche, it becomes a symbol loaded with projection. We imbue it with meaning far beyond its form. When someone taps like, we do not just see a pixel light up. We feel approval, acknowledgement, even intimacy. When the like is absent, we feel overlooked, dismissed, or even rejected. What's fascinating and troubling is how this modern symbol rivals ancient ones in emotional impact. Where, once the seal of a king or the blessing of a priest shaped collective identity, today the silent click of an anonymous user can alter our mood, self-perception, even our sense of belonging. The unconscious does not distinguish between the grandeur of ancient ritual and the banality of social media. It responds to symbols with the same emotional intensity. This is why a single like can wound or uplift. It is not the gesture itself, but what we project onto it. The hope of being seen, the fear of being forgotten, the hunger for connection. The like becomes a symbolic mirror, reflecting not what others truly feel about us, but what our unconscious longs to confirm. Jung warned of the danger in mistaking the symbol for the reality it points to. A symbol can guide, inspire, and reveal. But if we confuse it with the thing itself, we are misled. The like is not love, not friendship, not recognition in its fullest sense. It is merely a sign, a shadow of connection. And yet, because it taps into the same archetypal structures that govern human belonging and validation, its influence is immense. We may laugh at its simplicity, but our psyche treats it with gravity. The unconscious whispers, "This matters," even when consciously we know it should not. Why does waiting for a simple digital response feel so heavy? Why can the absence of a like sting more deeply than the absence of a real conversation? To understand this, we must look at what Jung called the narcissistic wound, the deep sensitivity of the ego when it does not feel seen, valued, or mirrored by others. In childhood, our earliest sense of self is shaped through reflection. A parent's gaze, a nod of approval, a gentle word, these are mirrors that tell us, you exist, you matter, you are loved. When that mirroring is inconsistent, conditional, or withheld, the child grows up carrying an invisible wound, the terror of not being acknowledged. In adulthood, this wound often resurfaces in subtle ways. In relationships, we crave signs of recognition. In social groups, we seek reassurance of belonging. And in the digital world, the like becomes a compressed symbol of this entire process. It is not the icon we are truly waiting for. It is the confirmation that someone has seen us, that we are not invisible. The pain of waiting is the pain of the narcissistic wound reopening. Each moment without that notification triggers a familiar echo. What if I'm not enough? What if they don't care? What if I don't matter? The psyche spirals into self-doubt, not because of the absence of a click, but because of the ancient hunger for recognition that lies beneath. Jung taught that when the ego clings to external mirrors, it becomes fragile. It cannot stand firmly on its own ground. This is why the wait for digital validation feels so tormenting. It exposes how dependent the ego has become on the gaze of others, even in its shallowest form. The tragedy is that the soul seeks something far richer. It does not want to be reduced to a number or a reaction. It longs for authentic presence, for a gaze that lingers, for words that carry weight. Yet when these are absent, the psyche settles for crumbs. and even those crumbs can stir up the wound of being unseen. The waiting, then, is never just about the like. It is about the echo of a deeper cry. See me, confirm me, tell me I exist in your world. On the surface, digital interactions feel like contact. A notification lights up. A message is delivered, a like appears. And for a fleeting moment we feel touched by another. But when the moment passes, what remains is often not fulfillment, but emptiness. This is the paradox of the digital age. We are constantly in contact, yet rarely truly connected. A like can create the illusion of intimacy. It whispers, I see you, I acknowledge you, you are part of my world. Yet this acknowledgement exists without presence, without the warmth of a voice, without the depth of eye contact or the resonance of shared silence. It is contact stripped of substance, a shadow of what the soul truly craves. Jung might have seen in this paradox the danger of living in symbols detached from their roots. For him, contact was not just external, it was archetypal, a meeting of energies. To be with another person was to enter into a field of shared unconscious forces, where the psyche itself was nourished. But when the symbol of contact, the like, the message, the digital reaction, is severed from the living experience, it becomes hollow. The form remains, but the essence is gone. This hollowness explains why digital interactions can leave us lonelier than silence. True connection requires risk, presence, vulnerability, the courage to be seen as we are. The like costs nothing. It demands no effort, no sacrifice, no part of the self. And so, while it offers the surface of connection, it cannot satisfy the deeper hunger of the soul. The paradox grows sharper when we realize how much energy we invest in these illusions. Hours spent curating an image, waiting for reactions, scanning screens for signs of acknowledgement. All the while, the very real people in our lives, those who could offer genuine contact, remain at the periphery, overshadowed by the glow of a screen, and so we drift into a strange condition, always surrounded, yet often alone, always touched by signals, yet rarely held. This is the paradox of contact without contact, a life full of echoes, but starved of voices. Carl Jung taught that each of us carries a shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or refuse to acknowledge. It holds our insecurities, our cravings for approval, our fears of rejection. Most of the time, we project this shadow outward, seeing in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. And the digital world, with its endless mirrors and reactions, has become the perfect stage for the shadow to reveal itself. Think of the like. On the surface, it seems harmless, a symbol of acknowledgement. But beneath it, the shadow stirs. When we do not receive it, anger rises. Why didn't they notice me? Why don't they value me? When we do receive it, envy awakens. Why did I get only this many? Why did they get more? The shadow is not in the icon itself, but in the hidden wounds and desires it reflects back to us. In Jungian psychology, projections are keys to self-knowledge. When the absence of a like causes disproportionate pain, it points to an inner dependency we have yet to face. When the presence of a like brings a rush of relief, it reveals how fragile our self-worth has become. The digital symbol acts as a mirror, and what we see there is not the other, but our own unacknowledged need for validation. This is why social media can feel so intoxicating and so exhausting. It constantly calls forth the shadow, pulling our attention to the very places we are most vulnerable. Instead of engaging with the deeper work of integrating these hidden aspects, we chase reactions, hoping the next like will silence the discomfort. But the shadow does not disappear when ignored. It grows stronger in the dark. The path forward, Jung would argue, is not to demonize the digital symbol but to recognize it for what it is: a reflection. Each surge of jealousy, Each pang of rejection, each hollow thrill is an invitation to turn inward and ask, what part of myself am I refusing to own? Why do I need others to confirm my worth? In this way, the like is not only a trap, it is also a teacher, a small glowing icon that reveals the vast shadow we still carry within. Jung believed that one of the great struggles of the human psyche is the search for wholeness, to integrate the many parts of ourselves into a coherent, authentic self. But in the digital age, that search is constantly disrupted. Our identity fractures into multiple versions, the one we live in silence, the one we perform online, and the one we secretly long to become. When we tie our sense of worth to digital validation, this fragmentation deepens. There is the real self, messy, vulnerable, complex. Then there is the curated self, polished, filtered, designed for approval. And finally, the imagined self, the one we believe we must become to deserve recognition. These selves do not align. They pull us in different directions, leaving us disoriented and emotionally drained. A like may seem trivial, but it feeds this division. It affirms the curated self while leaving the real self untouched. The unconscious feels the split. They love the image of me. But do they know me? Do they value what I truly am? This dissonance is subtle, but corrosive. Over time, the gap between who we are and who we present becomes a chasm. Jung would call this a failure of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche. Instead of integration, we settle for imitation. We imitate what we think will be liked, approved, or celebrated. And in doing so, we lose the raw authenticity that could have nourished our true self. This is why so many feel exhausted after scrolling, posting, and waiting. The exhaustion is not only from overstimulation, it is from the psychic labor of maintaining fractured identities. To check notifications is to check which self has been validated today, and which has been ignored. The danger of this fragmentation is not only personal, but collective. A society of fractured selves becomes shallow, driven by images rather than substance. Relationships weaken, conversations flatten, intimacy becomes performance. And beneath it all, the soul hungers for what has been lost: unity, authenticity, wholeness. The like, then, is more than a small icon. It is a crack in the mirror of identity, a symbol of how easily we can be divided against ourselves when we mistake performance for presence and visibility for being. For Jung, Eros was not limited to romantic desire. It was the vital force of connection itself, the magnetic energy that binds one soul to another, that draws us into intimacy, communion, and depth. Eros is the thread that weaves meaning between two people. And yet, in the digital age, this sacred energy is often reduced to its thinnest form: a like. A like is quick, easy, and safe. It requires no risk, no vulnerability, no exposure of the self. But because it mimics acknowledgement, we confuse it with eros. We imagine we are seen through it, when in truth we are only glanced at. We imagine it builds a bond, when it merely flickers and disappears. What should be an energy of deep union has been replaced by a shallow gesture of convenience. This substitution leaves a mark on the psyche. Where eros nourishes, a like merely stimulates. Eros feeds on presence, shared time, and vulnerability. The like offers only immediacy. It is fast food for the soul, instantly gratifying but spiritually malnourishing. We mistake stimulation for sustenance and wonder why we remain hungry after being fed. The tragedy lies in how easily the soul accepts this substitution. Because we crave eros so deeply, even its counterfeit brings temporary relief. That little notification can feel like a touch, a whisper, a moment of union. Yet it cannot hold us in grief, cannot celebrate us in joy, cannot anchor us in the storm. It is a spark without warmth, a flame without firewood. Jung warned that when archetypal energies are distorted, they lead to neurosis. When eros, is reduced to pixels, the psyche grows restless, anxious, insatiable. Relationships lose their depth, interactions lose their weight. The soul begins to forget what true intimacy feels like, settling instead for digital shadows of love. But eros cannot be destroyed. It waits beneath the surface, reminding us that we long to be touched not by icons but by presence, not by symbols but by souls. The like may simulate eros, but it can never embody it. For eros is not a click. It is the living current that flows when two beings truly meet. Beneath every scroll, every post, every waiting glance at the screen, there lies a deeper hunger, the longing to be seen. Not in fragments, not in passing, not as an image competing for attention, but as a whole being, with depth, contradictions, wounds, and light. This is the need that no like can ever satisfy. Jung taught that the human soul yearns for wholeness, and to be seen in our wholeness is to feel that someone recognizes not only our outer mask, but also the hidden layers we often keep buried. A like cannot do this. It notices the mask, the projection, the surface we choose to show, but it cannot penetrate to the essence where the true self waits. This is why digital validation feels so fleeting. The moment we receive it, we are already hungry again. Because what we crave is not acknowledgement of our curated self, but recognition of our authentic self. The smile in our voice, the tremor in our silence, the contradictions that make us human. These cannot be reduced to an icon. The true longing is existential. We want to know that we matter, that our presence is not lost in the vast anonymity of the world. We want someone to witness us fully, not just what we produce or display, but who we are when no one is watching. That is the gaze that heals, the recognition that nourishes. And yet, in modern life, this depth of seeing has become rare. We are surrounded by people, but rarely mirrored in our entirety. The digital world multiplies contacts but diminishes presence. We confuse being noticed with being known, being acknowledged with being understood. The gap between these grows wider, and with it, our loneliness. To be genuinely seen is not to be perfect, polished, or admired. It is to be recognized in our humanity, fragile, flawed, alive. Jung would say this recognition awakens the soul because it touches the archetypal need for union. The like cannot do this. Only presence can. Only eyes that linger, words that listen, silences that embrace. The true longing of the human heart is not for numbers on a screen, but for a moment when another soul says, without words, "I see you, all of you, and you matter." If a single like can wound, it is because we have handed over too much of our worth to shallow symbols. The question then is not how to escape technology, but how to reclaim our relationship with it, how to move from unconscious dependence to conscious connection. For Jung, the goal of individuation was never to reject the world, but to live in it with awareness. That means recognizing symbols for what they are, without mistaking them for the reality they imitate. A like is not love, not presence, not intimacy. It is simply a signal. When we treat it as more than that, we allow our unconscious wounds to be exploited by empty gestures. The first step toward conscious connection is awareness, to pause and notice our own reactions. Why does this matter to me? What part of myself feels unseen? Why do I crave this sign of recognition? Each moment of discomfort can become a doorway into deeper self-knowledge. The like, in this way, becomes less of a trap and more of a mirror. The second step is to redirect our energy. Instead of investing our identity in digital performance, we can cultivate spaces of real presence. Conversations where silence is honored, relationships where vulnerability is welcomed, moments where we are fully here. Technology can serve these connections, but it cannot replace them. The third step is integration. Jung would remind us that wholeness comes not from denying our hunger for validation, but from embracing it consciously. Yes, we want to be seen. Yes, we want to belong. These are not weaknesses, but truths of the human condition. The key is to seek fulfillment of these truths in depth, not in fragments. Conscious connection, then, is not about rejecting the like, it is about refusing to let it define us. It is about remembering that symbols are powerful, but presence is sacred. And when we dare to step beyond the screen, to risk being seen in our full humanity, we rediscover the nourishment our souls have been craving all along. Because in the end, the heart does not remember the numbers. It remembers the voices, the eyes, the moments where love was real.